Awesome. Well, I feel like I'm kind of speaking in a party, so I will attempt to tell you all the story that Alexandra very kindly just introduced. My name is Beatie Wolfe. I'm a singer-songwriter, storyteller, and innovator. And I was speaking at DLD Health in the summer about my Power of Music and Dementia project, which is quite a different topic from today. But what links these two projects is seeing music differently. And I guess I should start by saying I've always been a lover of three things. The first is the tangibility of music, for example, old school records and vinyls. The second is the story of the artist, which can be told through the liner notes, the artwork, the lyrics. And the third is the potential creativity of an album release. And I feel that there's been somewhat of a loss of some of this recently, and the fullness of those aspects have kind of been somewhat compressed. So with my new album, Montague Square, I really wanted to test the limits of storytelling, of tangibility, and of creativity, matched with full, uncompressed sound. So as a brief background, as an artist, three things have always been important to me. The first is being of service. The second is keeping the parameters open to whatever inspires me. And the third is the importance of one's intention. These three things have motivated me to create the world's first 3D interactive album app for my debut album, 8, a kids' charity project with over 50,000 children, co-found the first study of its kind looking at music for people with dementia, but in this case, music that people were hearing for the first time. And most recently, developed a musical jacket and the first deck of NFC cards for my latest album, Montague Square. Today, I'm going to share the story of my musical jacket and its conception from the room where Hendrix wrote the Wind Cries Mary and McCartney penned Eleanor Rigby, through to it being woven out of my musical threads and cut by the tailor who dressed Bowie and Jagger and Hendrix in the 60s. So earlier this year, I met a man called David Mason, who is a Savile Row tailor originally to James Bond. And he told me, very top secret, and actually very James Bond, that he was acquiring the rock and roll label of Mr. Fish, who dressed Hendrix and Bowie and Jagger in the 60s. And then he told me about his new home, which was the first home of Yoko and John Lennon. Now, David, knowing that I was a huge Lennon fan, very kindly invited me over for tea. So I was waiting for him to make the tea, and I noticed this series of black and white pictures on the wall behind me. And I saw that it was Hendrix, and it was McCartney, and Ringo, and Yoko, and Lennon, and they were all sitting in the same seat that I was sitting in. The latter two, I think, were naked, quite appropriately. And when David came back in the room, I asked him, what is this place? What is the history of this place? And he said, this is only a snapshot. So 50 years ago, Ringo bought 34 Montague Square. He used it as his drumming rehearsal room because it was about 10 minutes away from Abbey Road. He then leased it to McCartney, who wrote and recorded The Wind Cries Mary and also used it as his Zapple headquarters for a while. Hendrix flies over from America and needs somewhere to stay, and McCartney says, oh, well, you know, you can come and live here, I'm moving out. So Hendrix then, one night, after some tempestuous argument with his girlfriend, who he likes to irritate by calling Mary, because that's her middle name and she hates it, she storms out and he writes and records The Wind Cries Mary, again in that room. Now, Ringo actually had to chuck Hendrix out because he whitewashed the walls when he was high on acid. And then Yoko and Lennon move in and restore the piece of 34 Montague Square. So as I was absorbing this information, it felt like I'd discovered a secret Abbey Road studios. And I was already imagining what it would be like to record my album single in that room with all the resonance and all of the history. And I felt that there was a story brewing. Later that week, I was at a friend's book launch, a book called Digital Handmade, which is about celebrating craftsmen that are working in the digital era. And I met one artist, a textiles artist called Beatie Wolfe, who essentially takes music and translates it into fabric. And she was explaining what she did, and it was a bit confusing. And next to us on this plinth was this wonderful chair, this gold and silver chair. And I stopped her and I said, "Nadia, is this chair anything to do with your work?" And she said, "Yes, that's the Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds armchair." And suddenly it all came together. So we would hold this evening at 34 Montague Square, and we'd invite the founding fathers of rock journalism who'd grown up with the Beatles, grown up with Mr. Fish, and who'd been dying to visit this room. And there we would announce David as the new Mr. Fish for the 21st century, and I would record the album single live in that room where Eleanor Rigby and the Wind Cries Mary had been written. And this live recording, complete with its ambient sound, with the resonance of the room, with the audience applause, would then be woven into its geometric patterning by textiles label Beatie Wolfe, and a fabric that would then be cut into this signature musical jacket by Hendrix and Bowie and Jagger's Taylor from the 1960s. Now, not only was my song the first song that was recorded in that room since the golden era, but this is actually the first bespoke piece that's been cut by Mr. Fish since he dressed Hendrix and Bowie. For me, this is a wonderful synthesis of fashion, of history, of technology, of textiles, and of course, music. And I like to think of it as a truly tailored album release for the 21st century. Now, I hope you'll agree, this story is great, and it takes people on a journey, which I love about music. But it's not as accessible as I found my 3D interactive app was. So I wanted to create an equivalent for everyone to enjoy. And earlier last year, I met the CEO of a company called Moo. I believe you've all received your Moo cards. And he presented me with a box that they designed for Art Basel, this very beautiful aesthetic box. And then 10 minutes later, he was talking to me about NFC and NFC-enabled business cards that they were just about to launch. Now, the box and the NFC were really two separate conversations, but in my mind, I put them together. And I saw Montague Square being released as the first box set of NFC cards, much like the old box sets of vinyls. Like my app, I felt this was a lovely combination of tangibility, of storytelling, but enhanced by digital immediacy. And to make my jacket come alive even more, I decided to make it NFC-enabled as well. So you guys can come and tap me afterwards, and I will play music. So as well as this rather off-the-cuff album release of the Take Me Home jacket, Montague Square was also released as the world's first album deck of NFC cards. And as music is at the core of everything that I'm talking about, I'm now going to play to you. It will be 3D. It can be interactive, depending on if you want to clap along. And it will definitely be NFC enabled.